crept through my curtains, like a shy visitor unsure if it was welcome yet. Soft gold settling on my floorboards, and strokes gentle enough to wake a deeper part of me, one I thought had gone quiet for good. I sat on the edge of the bed, eyes still heavy with the ghosts of old dreams, and felt a strange stillness inside my chest. Not emptiness, but the kind of calm that comes after a storm finally decides to rest. There was a time I woke to a silence so heavy it took hours just to breathe through it. But today the quiet felt different, like a soft blanket instead of a weight, like a friend sitting beside me instead of grief pressing against my ribs. This was the morning I found my voice in the quiet, not the loud one I used to force into the world, but the soft one, the honest one, the one that arises only when a man has finally stopped running from himself and hearing it again. Felt like waking up for the very first time. I walked to the window and opened it just enough for the morning breeze to slip in, carrying with it the scent of wet pavement and distant bakeries starting their day. Every breath tasted like possibility. Oh, my voice didn't come out as words at first. It arrived as a feeling, a quiet hum inside my chest, vibrating through every scar I've collected, tender, patient, like it was saying I never left. You just forgot how to hear me. Maybe voices aren't lost, maybe they hide under survival, under fear, under the noise of a world that asks too much from men who've never learned how to ask anything back. I whispered into the morning air, testing the sound of myself again, and the room echoed with a softness that felt like truth. First time in years, the truth didn't hurt. As the sun climbed higher, I felt my voice settle back into me. Not perfect, not loud, but real. And that was enough to start again. There were years When I walk through life carrying a weight I couldn't explain, the heaviness settled deep in my bones, like a winter that refused to thaw. And back then I thought it was just brokenness. I didn't know that what lived inside my chest was a kind of blues older than my name, a quiet ache humming beneath everything, waiting patiently for me to finally listen. I used to blame myself for every tremble in my hand, every night my breath felt borrowed, every morning the mirror reflected a face I barely claimed. I thought sorrow meant failure. I didn't know it was another language. These were the blues I carried without knowing their name, the blues that whispered through my ribs when the world fell silent, the blues that shaped me long before I learned how to sing them. And now naming them feels like freeing a part of me I kept locked away in the dark. One night, sitting alone with the lamp barely glowing, I heard my heart speak in a tone I recognized from old vinyl records, tired, longing, honest in ways I never allowed myself to be. It hit me then, I wasn't broken, I was carrying stories that needed room to breathe. Pain wasn't my enemy, it was my teacher, my witness, my quiet companion on nights I thought I stood alone. Maybe blues isn't sadness, maybe it's true, sung slowly, true stretched in a melody, so a man can hold it without crumbling under its weight. So I let those unnamed blues rise inside my throat tonight, not to shout, not to cry out for help, but simply to speak, soft, steady, like a man finally claiming in every chapter of his life. And as the last note settled into the quiet of the room, I realized the weight was lighter, because the blues finally had a name, and the man carrying them finally had a voice. Clock on the wall tick like a soft reminder that the night wasn't going anywhere. His hands moving slow enough for me to hear the room breathing in the spaces I once filled with panic I couldn't control. I sat in my living room, lamp barely glowing, shadows stretched across the floor like memories too tired to haunt me anymore. For the first time in years, I didn't feel haunted. There were nights my fears chased me through every corner, loud, breathless things that clawed at my ankles whenever silence grew too deep. But tonight they settled like they finally understood. I wasn't running anymore. This was a night my fears sat down instead of chasing me. Tired wolves curling at my feet, breathing heavy but peaceful, as if they spent a lifetime trying to warn me, not break me. And for the first time I felt brave enough to look them in the eye. I could almost hear the whispers of every moment I flinched at the world, at loss, at love, at the truth of my own reflection. But the whispers didn't hurt tonight, they simply existed like distant thunder, no longer threatening rain. I leaned back in my chair and let the quiet settle onto my shoulders, heavy but familiar, and realized the only thing that ever made fear powerful was the way I ran from it. Maybe the things we fear most are just parts of ourselves we left out in the cold too long, waiting at the door, wanting only to be acknowledged. So I spoke softly, not to the room, but to the shadows curled around my feet. I see you, and I'm done being afraid of the pieces of me that needed help the most. And I didn't answer, I didn't need to. The silence felt warm, comforting, like the sound of fear finally learning how to rest. I walk down the old street tonight, the one line with flickering lamps and cracks in the sidewalk. I used to trip over as a kid. The pavement still held the warmth of the day, but the air carried the cool promise of something shifting and inside me. Each step felt like turning the page of a book I thought I'd already finished, but the wind pushed softly at my back like it knew more chapters waited just around the corner. I passed the bakery where I once bought cheap coffee to stay awake through long nights, pretending I had everything figured out tonight. The smell of fresh bread felt like an invitation to start with gentler expectations. This was the street where I realized I was still becoming, not broken, not complete, but beautifully unfinished, like a blues riff stretching into the night, searching for the next honest note. And for the first time, that truth didn't scare me. A group of teenagers laughed near the bus stop, their voices bright and careless in ways I once was. I smiled not out of longing, but out of gratitude for every version of myself that carried me here. I passed the corner store where I once stood trembling after a heartbreak that cut too deep, thinking the world had ended tonight. The neon sign buzzing overhead felt like a reminder that endings are just places where new beginnings quietly wait. Maybe growth isn't a destination, maybe it's a rhythm, a slow and steady blues line that bends with every experience, every scar, every sunrise we survive. I stopped beneath the last street lamp, its golden halo settling on my shoulders like a blessing I didn't expect, and whispered to the night, I'm still learning, and that's enough. As I walked home, the street behind me glowed softly, like it knew it had watched me change, and wasn't done showing me who I could still become. chair sat by the window, the same way it always had. Quiet, patient, like it was waiting for someone who hadn't stepped through my door in years. But tonight, it didn't sting the way it used to. There was a time that empty chair felt like a wound, a reminder of voices gone, laughter lost, the weight of conversations that never found their way back into the room. But tonight it looks softer. I walk toward it with slow, steady steps, not because I fear the ache it used to bring, but because I wanted to honor the part of me that once hurt so deeply in its presence. This was the night the empty chair didn't feel so lonely anymore, where absence didn't echo, where silence didn't accuse, where the space beside me felt open instead of hollow. And for the first time I realized emptiness could also be peace. I placed my hand on the top of the wooden backrest, feeling the warmth from the evening sun that had rested there before me. And the memory of old sadness rose in my chest, not sharp, but gentle. I remember nights I stared at that chair with eyes burning, feeling smaller than the space it left behind. But the man I am tonight sat there with calm breath and steady hands. Maybe loneliness isn't the enemy. Maybe it's a shadow that softens when we stop running from it, when we learn to fill our own spaces with kindness instead of fear. I sat in the chair and looked around the room, noticing how the light moved across the walls like it was painting a quiet blessing. And I whispered, this is my space now, and it's enough. The chair didn't creak the way it used to, and the silence around me felt warm, like a room breathing slowly after years of holding its breath. I stopped beneath the streetlight tonight, one that's lit my way home more times than I can count. Its soft golden circle falling around me like the gentle arm of a friend telling me to breathe. The light hum quietly, a familiar melody I'd heard on nights I rushed through life, too tired to notice the world softening around me, as if it wanted to catch my fall. But tonight I didn't rush. I stood there, letting the glow settle over my shoulders like a warm promise, one that said I didn't need to be strong every minute to deserve the road beneath my feet. Under that streetlight I realized I was allowed to rest, allowed to pause, to breathe, to let the world keep spinning without me carrying all its weight. And the moment felt holy, like a hymn whispered just for tired souls. I lifted my face to the warm halo above, feeling the night air cool against my skin. And for the first time in years, my heart beats slow without asking permission. Cars pass by in the distance, their soft hum reminding me that life keeps going even when I start to heal, that the world doesn't fall apart when I take a moment to gather myself. Maybe rest isn't a weakness, maybe it's the rhythm that carries us through the darkest blues, the breath between notes that makes the melody whole. I whisper thank you to the quiet street, to the gentle light, to the part of me that finally softened enough to accept rest without guilt. And the night held my words like a lullaby. I walked home slowly, letting the glow fade behind me, not as something I left behind, but something I carried in my chest. I stood in the hallway of my childhood home tonight, dust floating in the warm lamplight, like tiny memories drifting back in a reach. And there it was, the old wooden door frame, etched with uneven pencil lines, that once told the story of how quickly my body grew. I traced the tallest mark with my fingertip, remembering the excitement in my eyes the day I reached it. The pride in a young boy who thought growing up was something you could measure with inches and wood. But as I stood there tonight, a grown man with quiet storms inside him, I realized no one marked the lines of the years when I learned to survive loneliness, or the nights I discovered what bravery truly feels like in the dark. This was the door frame that measured the height. I didn't notice growing, not the inches in my bones, but the courage in my chest, the softness in my voice, the strength in my trembling hand. And for the first time, I honored the kind of growth no pencil ever captured. I remember the summer I stood against this door frame with scraped knees and big dreams that didn't yet understand how heavy the world could be. But innocence has its own blueprint, one I carry longer than I thought. I lean my head against the fading wood, letting childhood laughter echo softly in my memory, and felt something inside me unclench, like forgiveness for all the versions of me that had to grow without guidance. Maybe the tallest growth is a kind no one claps for, the gentle expansions of the heart, the widening of patience, the strengthening of hope after it's been broken more times than you can admit. So I took a pencil, pressed a faint line just above the highest mark, not because my body had grown, but because my soul had, and that measurement felt truer than any from my childhood. I stepped back from the door frame, smiled at the past, painted lightly across the wood, and whispered, look how far we've come. The hallway stayed quiet, but the silence felt proud. The old mailbox creak when I opened it tonight. The metal cold beneath my fingers, like it remembered the years I avoided its quiet mouth out of fear for what waited inside. Stuffed in the bag were envelopes yellow with time, edges curl like tired sides, each one holding a truth I once felt too fragile to touch, too afraid to understand. I pulled out the first letter, this weighed heavier than the paper it was written on. And for a moment I held it like a fragile piece of my past, a reminder of other nights I chose fear over knowing. This was the mailbox that collected the things I was too afraid to read. Words from people I lost, messages from the man I used to be, confessions sealed shut because I didn't yet have the strength to let them in. But tonight I opened each one with steady hands. Yeah. One letter was from a friend I drifted from too soon. His handwriting shaky with concern, I was too proud to receive. Reading his words now felt like balm to a wound I denied for years. Another envelope held a message I'd written to myself, a younger voice begging for a future where the pain would ease. I read it slowly, feeling his fear, and whispered, we made it. Just moments, waiting for the right version of you to understand them. Not once, but milestones you weren't ready to confront. By the time the last letter lay open on the table, the fear that once lived inside me felt small, like a shadow shrinking at sunrise. And for the first time, the mailbox looked empty in a comforting way. I closed the metal door gently as if thanking it for holding pieces of me I wasn't ready to face, and I walked back inside with lighter pockets and a heart finally brave enough to read its own history. the corner flickered, like it was deciding whether to stay awake with me. Its glow trembling softly against the wallpaper that had listened to my silence far longer than any person ever did. I sat at the edge of the room, hands folded like a prayer. I didn't know how to speak, and breathed into the stillness, as if waiting for permission to finally tell the truth. I've been carried like a stone in my throat. At first the words wouldn't come, they pressed against my ribs, heavy, uncertain, afraid of the air outside my body. But the night was gentle, the room warm, and little by little I found my voice. And the walls, they whispered my secrets back to me, not harshly, not like an accusation, but like a lullaby for the wounded places I tried too long to hide. This was the night my truth finally echoed without breaking me. I spoke to the dark corners, to the fears I tucked away there, to the memories I shoved behind furniture and distractions, to the younger me who never knew how to ask for softness. The air shifted with every confession, like the room exhaled with me, easing the weight on my shoulders with each trembling word. The walls didn't shrink, they grew wider, making space for everything I poured out. Maybe the things we bury don't disappear. Maybe they wait for the night we're gentle enough to unearth them, without shame, without fear, with nothing but trembling honesty. By the time I finished speaking, my chest felt open, like a window unlatched after years of winter, and the room, it held me quietly, like a friend who'd been waiting for this moment just as long as I had. I turned off the lamp with steady hands, letting the darkness settle without fear. For the first time, my secrets felt like stories. I survived, not burdens I carry alone. Whoa. 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 river moves slow tonight, its surface catching the streetlight like long threads of melted gold, pulling the darkness gently downstream. And there it was, the old bench beneath the willow tree, right where I left 1,000 quiet thoughts on nights I couldn't hold myself together. I sat down without thinking, my body remembering the shape of this familiar rest, the wood warming beneath me, as if recognizing the weight it had carried for years. The breeze brushed past my face, cool and tender, lifting the tightness from my shoulders with the same care the river gave to fallen leaves, carrying them softly towards something calmer. This was the bench by the river that knew when I needed to sit. Before I spoke it, before I admitted it, before I understood, rest wasn't a weakness but a quiet act of survival. And tonight it held me just as gently as it always had. I watched the water ripple like it was breathing with me, long, slow, steady. And for the first time in days, my own breath matched its rhythm, no longer rushed, no longer shallow. I remember the nights I came here shaking, eyes red, hands cold, heart full of storms, and how the bench never asked for explanation, never demanded strength, just offer space. Maybe places love us in ways we fail to love ourselves. Quiet, patient, waiting with open arms for the moment we're brave enough to stop running. No, this was the bench by the river, and I needed to sit. Before I spoke it, before I admitted it, before I understood, rest wasn't a weakness but a quiet act of survival. And tonight it held me just as gently as it always had. Slightly above my head, feeling the river's hum settle into my bones, and I whispered, I'm tired, but I'm healing. When I finally rose to leave, the bench stayed warm behind me, not as something I left, but something that stayed inside my chest, steady and still, like the promise of gentler days ahead. I caught my reflection in the darkened window tonight, not in a mirror meant for truth, but in a pane of glass, glowing faintly with streetlight. in the quiet hum of midnight. And somehow I look softer than I remember. The man staring back at me didn't have the harsh eyes I've grown used to seeing in my imagination. His gaze was steady, gentle even, like he knew the storms I'd weathered without needing to relive them. My reflection wasn't perfect. There were shadows under my eyes, lines written by years I didn't know how to carry gracefully. But they didn't make me look tired, they made me look real. In that quiet window, I saw a reflection, kind of, than the one I held in my mind. A man who learned to stay, to breathe, to survive his own doubts. And for the first time, I felt compassion for the face I'd avoided for so long. I lifted my hand and touched the cold glass, expecting to feel distance, but instead it felt like the briefest connection between who I was and who I'm learning to be. Cars passed by behind me, their headlights painting my reflection in streaks of gold, and each flash of light softened the hard edges of my story, edges I once believed would define me forever. Maybe the world doesn't change, maybe we do, maybe reflections grow kinder when we finally stop seeing ourselves through the eyes of fear and start seeing the quiet strength we earned the hard way. I lean my forehead against the cool window pane and whisper to the man on the other side, you made it. And his faint smile, soft in the glass, was all the answer I needed. As I turned away, the reflection faded, but the gentleness stayed, settling in my chest like a truth long overdue.
The street was almost empty tonight, just a hush of evening wind, moving fallen leaves across the pavement, like tiny dancers following a rhythm only they could hear. I stepped into that quiet without hurry. My footsteps echoed softly, a slow and steady cadence I'd rarely known. Most nights they stumbled, rushed, outrunning worries that pressed against my ribs. But tonight my breath fell in line with each step, like two old companions finally agreeing to move the same way at the same time. It felt almost holy. On that quiet street, my breath finally matched my steps. No trembling rush, no shallow panic, just a calm rhythm that felt like truth settling into a tired heart. And for the first time in months, I felt whole. I passed a row of dim shop windows, their reflections stretching into soft, sleepy shapes, and each one seemed to nod as if acknowledging how far I'd come without applause. The evening air was cool, but it didn't bite. It wrapped around me gently, lifting the tension that usually clung to my shoulders like a too heavy coat. Baby, healing isn't sudden. Baby, it's a moment like this, on a quiet street, when your body finally remembers how to breathe without fear, whispering in your ear. I paused beneath a street lamp, watching my breath float softly into the air, and realized it no longer raced ahead of me or lagged behind. It simply existed with me, for me. I kept walking, slow and steady, my breath and my steps moving together like a blues refrain, soft, honest, finally at peace. I walked through the hallway tonight, lights dim, floorboards sighing under my feet like they knew the weight I carried into every room. And they're leaning against the wall, half hidden in shadow, was the old mirror I used to avoid. For years I hurried past it, eyes fixed on anything but my own reflection, afraid the glass would show a man I wasn't ready to face. A man tired, shaken, afraid of his own unspoken truths. But tonight, without planning to, I look in the face staring back, didn't flinch, didn't hide behind shame or apology. It simply existed, steady, honest. In that hallway mirror, I saw the man I grew into. Not perfect, not untouched, but stronger in the places where life cracked me open. Softer in the places where pain once made me rigid, and for the first time felt proud of him. My eyes carried the weight of 100 late nights, but they were clearer than I remembered. Less haunted, more understanding, like they finally learned how to forgive the past without forgetting it. There were lines around my mouth, not from bitterness, but from surviving, from laughing on days I didn't think I could, from choosing to speak gently when anger would have been easier. Maybe we grow in ways mirrors can't measure, in courage, in compassion, in the quiet strength to stand alone without collapsing inward. But sometimes if the light is right, the glass catches a glimpse of it. I reached out and touched the edge of the frame, feeling the wood worn smooth by time, and whispered to my reflection, you made it farther than you ever believed you could. The man in the mirror held my gaze, steady and grateful. As I walked away, the mirror dimmed into shadow again, but the strength I saw in it followed me down the hallway, settling into my chest like a truth I was finally ready to hold. I found an old journal tonight, tucked beneath a stack of books I swore I'd never touch again. It's leather worn, its pages curl like they've been waiting for my hands to grow steady enough to open them. There was a time I couldn't even look at it. The weight of its words too sharp to hold. Every page carrying a piece of the man I used to be, a man I wasn't sure I'd ever forgive. But tonight, my fingers didn't tremble when they brushed the cover. The ache was there, but soft like a bruise that had finally stopped being tender. This was the book I reopened when my hands stopped shaking. The book that held my heartbreak, my lost years, my unfinished prayers. And turning each page felt like honoring a version of myself I was finally strong enough to face. The first page carried a shaky paragraph written on a night I felt too small for my own life. Letters pressed so hard, the ink nearly tore through. Reading it now, I didn't feel shame, I felt compassion. Further in, I found smiles hidden between lines of sorrow. Moments where hope peeked through, like sunlight edging past curtains on a long dark morning. And I felt grateful for every flicker of light that kept me going. Maybe some stories aren't meant to be erased. Maybe they're meant to wait on dusty shelves until the day we can read them without breaking, until the day we're healed enough to understand them. I close the journal gently, holding it to my chest, like a relic of a life I survived. And in a quiet whisper, meant only for the pages, I said thank you for waiting, for the person I've become. I placed the book back on the shelf, not to hide it, but to honor it. And as I walked away, my hands stayed steady, my breath stayed soft, and the past felt lighter than it ever had. The sun was slipping behind the rooftops when I stepped onto the quiet street. Its last golden thread stretching long across the pavement, painting my shadow beside me like an old companion I'd ignored for years. There was a time I couldn't stand to see my silhouette, a dark outline of all the mistakes I carried like stones in my pockets, all the fears I tried too hard to outrun. But tonight it didn't loom, it softened. I walked slowly, watching that familiar figure match my pace, step for step, breath for breath. Not chasing me, not chasing anything, just existing with me in a way that felt almost gentle. This was a street where my shadow finally walked beside me, no longer stretching ahead like a warning, no longer dragging behind like regret, but standing right at my side as if to say, I'm part of you, not something you need to run from. The evening breeze brush against my cheeks, lifting the heaviness I once wore around my shoulders like a second skin. Even the air felt lighter, like the whole world was exhaling with me. A dog barked in the distance, a porch light flickered on, in the quiet rhythm of the neighborhood wrapped itself around me like a soft blanket, stitched from memories I didn't know could feel this warm. Maybe shadows aren't meant to haunt us, maybe they're just reminders that we've survived enough light and enough darkness to become whole. Maybe healing is letting the past walk with you instead of behind you. I stop beneath the street lamp and watch my shadow settle at my feet. Calm, steady, no longer trembling, and in the stillness I whisper, I'm not afraid of you anymore. The shadow didn't change, it didn't need to. I walked home slowly, my shadow keeping pace, two silhouettes moving as one softened soul, finally at peace on a street that once held all my fear. Steam curled upward from the mud like soft fingers, stroking the morning air, warm in the kitchen with a scent that felt familiar, but somehow brighter than usual, like hope had been dissolved into every drop. I wrap my hands around the cup, its heat soaking into my palms, like a kindness I didn't know I needed so badly. The first sip came slow, deep, gentle, and something inside my chest shifted. There were mornings when coffee tasted like survival,
to push through another day with a heart too tired to carry itself. But today it tasted like beginning, like the first line of a story I hadn't written yet. This was the cup of coffee that tasted like start and go. Warm honest, free of the weight that used to live on my tongue. And with every sip I felt a soft open inside me, a quiet promise that life could feel new. Sunlight drifted in through the blinds, painting stripes of gold across the tabletop. And for the first time in months, I didn't rush the moment. I let it slow me down, let it fill the spaces that once felt hollow. I thought about all the nights I shook alone in this kitchen, hands trembling around a cup that tasted like exhaustion. Yet somehow, through grief, through doubt, through silence, I arrived at this moment. Maybe starting over isn't loud or dramatic. Maybe it's a sip of warm coffee on a quiet morning, when your heartbeat relaxes just enough to believe in gentler days. I lean back in my chair, letting the mug rest between my hands, and whispered, I'm ready now for whatever comes. And the steam rose like a blessing when I finished the last sip. The morning felt lighter, not because the world changed, but because I did one warm cup and one quiet breath at a time. Night wrapped itself around the room like a soft blanket of shadow, so quiet I could hear my own breath tremble against the edges of my ribs. I sat there in the half-light, no music, no words, no expectations, just the weight of being alive. For years I feared silence, the way a man feels a locked room with no windows, afraid of what might echo back from the deepest corners of his own heart. But tonight the quiet felt different, less like a voice, more like a companion. I let the stillness settle like dust on an untouched shelf.
covering everything I once tried too hard to explain. And the longer I listen, the more I realize silence wasn't accusing, it was understanding. This was the night I sat in silence and found more than words. Found breath, found truth, found the pieces of myself that only rise to the surface when the world stops spinning long enough for the heart to whisper louder than the mind. The shadows on the wall shifted like slow dancers, not frightening, just reminders that even stillness has movement if you look closely enough. I follow their rhythm until my heartbeat softens. The room smelled faintly of old books and the lingering warmth of a lamp I turned off too late. I closed my eyes and for a moment felt every version of myself sit beside me like quiet ghosts, placing gentle hands on my shoulders. Maybe silence isn't empty, maybe it's the language our soul speaks when we finally step away from noise long enough to hear it. I breathed in deeply, letting air fill the spaces once crowded with fear, and whispered, I'm listening now, not expecting an answer, but receiving one anyway, in the form of peace I hadn't felt in years. I stayed in that silence until the night turned soft gray, and when I finally rose from the chair, my chest felt lighter, my steps steadier, and I carried the quiet with me like a truth too important to forget. The streetlights flickered the light as I turned on to the long road home. The warm halos stretching like open arms across the pavement. I'd walked this way 1,000 times, but tonight the steps felt easier. There were nights this walk felt endless, each block a mountain, each corner a reminder of how heavy my heart was inside its tired cage.
but the air was softer now, like the city was breathing with me instead of against me. Cars hum by like slow distant lullabies, and the breeze carried the faint smell of rain mixed with something sweet. Maybe someone baking late, maybe just hope in a small unexpected form. This was the walk home. It didn't feel so long anymore, where the weight I'd carried finally loosened its grip, where the darkness felt gentle instead of swallowing, where every slow step felt like a promise that tomorrow wouldn't be so hard. I passed a street corner where I once stopped to catch my breath. On a night my chest felt too tight to carry another block. Tonight I walk past it calmly, my breath flowing smooth and steady. A dog barked from a porch, tail wagging against the railing, and its soft greeting felt like a reminder. There's some things in life always meet you with simple kindness. Maybe the path doesn't change, maybe we do. Maybe long roads shorten when the heart finds a steadier rhythm, when the wounds stop bleeding, when the night becomes less of an enemy. As I reached my street, the moon broke through the clouds, casting silver light on the sidewalk ahead. And I realized I wasn't just walking home, I was walking back to a version of myself I thought I'd lost. The key clicked softly in the lock as I opened my door, and for the first time in months, entering my home didn't feel like retreating. It felt like arriving exactly where I needed to be.
The room was dark, but not the frightening kind. It was a kind of darkness that waits patiently, like it knows a small flame is about to be born. I held the old lantern in my hands, its metal cold and familiar, its glass smudged with years of silence. For so long I'd apologize for everything, for wanting rest, for wanting softness, for wanting to simply exist without shrinking myself to fit the comfort of others. But tonight, I was done bowing to the ghosts of old expectations. My fingers trembled as I struck the match, not from fear, but from the weight of choosing myself for the first time in years. The flame caught slowly like a shy truth, learning how to speak. This was the lantern I lit when I finally stopped apologizing for existing, a soft, honest fire that warmed the parts of me I'd kept in the shadows, and as its glow filled the room, so did the quiet certainty that I deserve to take up space in this world. The flame flickered with every breath I took, dancing gently as if mirroring the heartbeat of a man learning how to stand tall, with both feet planted in his own worth. I watched the walls brighten, corners long forgotten, blushing with gold, and realized I wasn't lighting the room, I was lighting myself from the inside out, softly, slowly, deliberately. Maybe we spend half our lives fighting to justify our presence, but the moment we stop, the moment we say I am enough, the darkness shifts into something holy. I touch the lantern's warm frame, feeling the heat seep into my palms, and whisper to the man I used to be, you don't need permission to breathe anymore. The flame answered with a steady glow. When I set the lantern down, the room looked different, not brighter, but braver. And the light inside me felt steady enough to guide me forward, one gentle breath at a time. Stretched long over the open road, a soft blue fading into gold as the last light settled behind the rooftops. I stepped onto the sidewalk without the usual rush, letting my feet choose a rhythm that felt human again. For years I move too fast, racing thoughts, racing time, racing shadows that never stop chasing me. My steps were always hurried, my breath always 2 beats ahead of my body. But tonight I slowed down, not because I was tired, but because something inside me finally whispered, you don't have to run anymore. And I listened. This was the road where I walked slower and finally felt the world catch up, where the breeze moving me, where the quiet hummed in harmony, where every step felt like a returning, a soft reunion between my heart and my pace. The houses I passed seemed warmer somehow, their windows glowing with simple evening rituals, laughter behind curtains, dinner plates clinking, a dog barking softly at nothing in particular. I noticed things I used to race past, the way the street lamp leaned just slightly to the left, the way wildflowers pushed through tiny cracks in the sidewalk, the way the sky held on to light a little longer than it needed to. Maybe the world was never ahead of me. Maybe I was just too busy running from old fears to notice its gentle rhythm, and slowing down felt like forgiveness, like letting myself breathe without guilt. My footsteps settled into a quiet blues tempo, steady as a warm bass line. And for the first time I didn't feel behind, I felt in tune with the road, with the night, with myself. By the time I reached my corner, the sky had turned deep amber, and I realized I wasn't just walking slower, I was living slower, in the best way. And the world for once felt right beside me. I stood in the doorway with my hand on the frame, feeling grooves in the wood left by years of hesitation. Nights I stepped forward, then retreated, afraid of the weight of my own choices. How many times had I lingered here, eyes fixed on the ground, heart caught between staying and stepping out. This threshold knew my fear better than I did. It had tasted more of my doubt than any prayer I ever whispered.
But tonight, the air on the other side felt different. Not easier, not safer, just honest. And honesty, for the first time, felt more comforting than the familiar ache behind me. This was a threshold I crossed without looking back this time. No half step, no turning to check if the past still called my name. No apology for wanting more than survival. In the moment my foot touched new ground, I knew I had chosen life over fear. Behind me, the room was quiet, filled with the faint scent of old routines and nights I spent living small to avoid being hurt again. I didn't hate that room, I just knew I'd outgrown its walls. Ahead of me, the hallway stretched like a soft, uncertain blues line. Not promising perfection, only possibility. And that was enough to move my tired bones forward. Maybe bravery isn't in the loud declaration we tell the world, maybe it's in the quiet moment when we step through the doorway without needing the comfort of looking back. I took another step, then another, each one lighter than the last, and felt something unhook from my rib. A weight I'd mistaken for identity, falling softly behind me. By the time I reached the end of the hall, the doorway was out of sight, but not out of memory. I carried this lesson, not as chains, and for the first time moving on felt like mercy. The sky was a soft gray sheet, pulled gently over the city. Rain tapping its quiet rhythm against the window pane, like fingers drumming a lullaby for tired souls. I lay there listening before I even opened my eyes. There was a time when mornings are like this pulled me under, when the clouds felt like a mirror of everything I carried inside. And the rain sounded like a chorus of reasons to stay in bed and disappear. But today, the sound was different, not heavy, not accusing, just kind. Each drop against the glass a soft reminder that the world gets to be messy and still keep turning. This was a rainy morning that didn't feel like a burden anymore, where the gray light felt gentle instead of cruel, where the steady drizzle washed my thoughts clean. Instead of drowning them and lying there, I realized the storm outside was nothing compared to the storms I'd already survived. I sat up slowly, watching rivulets of water race each other down the window, and saw a quiet beauty in their crooked paths. None of them straight, all of them honest. The coffee pot sputtered in the kitchen, filling the air with warmth and promise. And the simple act of standing, of walking barefoot across the floor, felt less like obligation and more like gratitude. Maybe rain isn't the enemy of joy. Maybe it's the soundtrack of renewal, giving us permission to slow down, to soften, to admit we need days that are more quiet than bright. I wrapped my hands around a warm mug and stood by the window, letting a cool gray light kiss my skin. I'm still here. I whispered to my reflection, and for once the words felt like a celebration instead of a confession. As the rain kept falling, the world outside blurred in a watercolor shape, soft, imperfect, alive. And inside my chest felt calm, matching the rhythm of a morning that finally felt like a gentle beginning. Cab door shut with a soft, tired thump, and in the hush that followed, the city pulled its golden threads across the window, a blur of streetlights and silhouettes melting into one long exhale. I lean my head against a cool glass, feeling the steady rhythm of the road beneath me. Each bump a reminder that even broken streets can carry you home if you let them. The driver hung quietly, a tune too soft to name, something warm and familiar that drifted into the air like incense from an old memory. I didn't need the words, the hum alone felt like comfort. This was the quiet taxi ride where I finally let the city hold me, not as a stranger, not as a wanderer, but as someone who belonged to the rhythm of its lights, its breath, its imperfect heartbeat. For the first time the night felt gentle. We rolled past diners, still glowing at midnight, where tired cooks wipe counters clean, and lonely customers held warm cups like lifelines. Rain began to fall, soft and slow, running down the window in trembling paths that looked a little too much like the tears I refused to shed tonight. I let the rain do it for me. Maybe we all need moments where we stop holding ourselves together and let something larger, a city, a song, a passing streetlight, hold us quietly. As we turned onto my block, the hum of the engine felt like a lullaby meant only for me. And when the cab slowed, I realized my breath had matched its rhythm the whole way home. I stepped out into the rain, softer shoulders, lighter hands, and a heart the city held just long enough to send me on my way. I slipped on an old jacket I hadn't worn in years. The fabric stiff with forgotten winters and too many nights. I walked alone under streetlights that never asked where I was going. As I slid my hand into the inside pocket, my fingers brushed something thin, fragile, a folded note I thought I'd thrown away a lifetime ago. My heart hesitated before my hands did, fearing the words might reopen wounds I wasn't ready to face. But the paper felt warm, as if it remembered me. This was the note I found in a jacket I thought I'd thrown away. A message from a younger heart, or a voice I lost somewhere between heartbreak and healing.
it now felt like receiving a gift meant for the version of me standing in this moment. The handwriting was shaky, letters slanting upward, as if reaching for hope that barely existed then. It read, please don't give up. You'll understand someday why you had to survive this. The words hit softly, not like a wound reopening, but like a hand on my back, guiding me forward. I felt the room tilt into a kind of silence that welcomed truth. Maybe we leave pieces of ourselves in old places, pockets, drawers, the folds of forgotten jackets, so they can wait for the future version of us who finally knows how to listen. I folded the note carefully, more gently than I'd held my own heart in years, and whispered I made it, just like you hoped I would. I slid the note back into the pocket, not to forget it, but to honor it. And the jacket felt warmer as I put it on again, as if carrying a piece of myself I finally recognized. The first light of dawn slipped beneath the curtains, like a shy visitor stepping softly into my room, painting the floorboards with pale gold that didn't ask for attention, only presence. My eyes open slowly, not startled, not rushing, just rising with a quiet certainty that today didn't need to be anything extraordinary for me to show up in it. For so long I demanded perfection, from mornings, from people, from myself. If the light wasn't bright enough, if my heart wasn't steady enough, I thought the day was already lost, but not today. This was the dawn that didn't need to be perfect for me to rise. A gentle light, a quiet breath, a stillness that felt like the world whispering, you're allowed to begin exactly as you are.
Birdsong drifted in from beyond the window, soft and hesitant, as if the wings singing were as tired as I'd been for months. But the song was enough, a reminder that even weary things still greet the morning. I sat up slowly, feeling the weight of the blanket slide from my chest. And for the first time I didn't rush to fill the silence with plans or noise. I let the quiet shape me. Maybe rising isn't about being strong. Maybe it's about accepting the simple grace of beginning. Even when the light is dim, even when the heart is still learning how to breathe without trembling. With bare feet on cool floor, I whisper to the soft light, I'm here. Not as a declaration of strength, but as a promise to keep choosing mornings that ask nothing but honesty. As the dawn widened, the room warmed gently, not perfectly, not dramatically, just enough. And in that tender glow I rose, quietly, fully, finally.